us off?
Yes, ma'am. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar on addressing chronic absenteeism through restorative processes. Before I have all the panelists introduce themselves, I do just want to go over some logistics. This is set up as a webinar, so a little different than your typical meeting. So we have the Q&A options. You can ask a question at any time. We'll all be watching that. We'll have time at the end for Q&A as well. So if you want to save your question for the end, you can certainly do that. You can also raise your hand. So down at the bottom of your panel, you should see that raise hand button. And when we see that, we can actually unmute you so you can ask your question or make your comment, whatever you want to share. At the end, a survey will automatically pop up when you leave the webinar. Please complete that. It should only take a few minutes. We would love to have your feedback on today. We have another session coming in December, so if there's any changes we could make, would love that feedback. This is being recorded, so we'll get that sent out along with a PDF of the PowerPoint to everyone who signed up. So if you know someone who signed up but ended up couldn't making it, they'll still have that recording to watch. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Nicole Britton, and I work with the Office of Dispute Resolution.
Hello, and I'm Kelly Riley. I am also with the Office of Dispute Resolution. And just as a little bit of background, before I was in this position, I was also an executive director of one of the mediation centers, actually the one located in Beatrice and serving Southeast Nebraska. I'll turn it over to you, Shirley, to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shirley Vargas. I'm the administrator for the Office of School and District Support at the Nebraska Department of Education, and super excited to be presenting along my colleagues here.
Excellent. And I am Charles Liskey. I am one of the current center directors. As you'll see later in the presentation, our state is split up between 6 centers, and we are in the 15 westernmost counties of the state with our home office in Scottsbluff.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michelle Luders, and I am the director for the Nebraska Mediation Center. Our center is located in Fremont, Nebraska physically, but we do cover 24 counties in northeast and north central Nebraska.
All righty, thanks everyone. Let's get started. Okay, I'm just going to quickly go over the learning objectives. We're going to talk about the collaboration that we want to see happen between the Nebraska Department of Education, ODR, all of the 6 mediation centers, and then of course the schools across Nebraska. We are going to look at some restorative process outcomes, data. We're going to give you some numbers to look at. We're also going to talk about the tier that restorative processes best fits. And then we're going to talk about our current $1 million grant that provides funds for restorative processes, where we're going to focus on upstream services, right? So kids, before they get into the system, obviously today we're going to focus on chronic absenteeism, and we're going to talk about a very specific service that can hopefully address chronic absenteeism. All righty, we are going to start off with a poll, get you guys kind of engaged and focusing. So it should be popping up here in a second. And it's going to ask, what is your level of knowledge of restorative practices? So go ahead and take some time. We'll try to get as many responses. Got quite a few that already recorded. We'll give it a few more seconds. That's 5 more people.
Going once, going twice. All right, we're going to end the poll.
All right, so we're kind of right there in the middle. No one is extremely familiar, which I kind of expected that. But I like that we've got about half they're very familiar, and you've actually participated in a restorative conference. That's awesome. And then not sure. Maybe you think you know, but not really sure. And thankfully, we don't have anyone who's absolutely never heard of it. Sheila Hubbard shared in the questions that Ellen Williams is familiar. So good deal. All righty. Let's get going.
All right, so we thought we would, of course, first start with just an overview of what are restorative practices. So at its core, it's about a dialogue, really. And it's peeling back those layers so that you can really get at the core of what is happening and what is causing that issue. And by doing that, when you can peel back those layers and really understand what is the root cause, it allows the participants to really collaborate and come up with a better plan that is very customized. And so one of the things when we talk about restorative justice, there's sort of three pillars. There's harms and needs, there's engagement, and there's collaboration, or that's not the word I wanted to use, accountability. And so we actually developed this graphic here because it really sort of encapsulates more of what that restorative dialogue is all about. So it's about human dignity and really understanding that everyone has worth. And so we need to focus not on the person, but on what happened, being empathetic, having respect and support, the engagement and collaboration, ownership and empowerment, being firm and fair. And all of that, when you incorporate all of that into your restorative dialogues, it can really lead to change and growth. And so that's sort of just a very high level overview of sort of what restorative justice looks like.
Excellent. So I want to just jump in quickly and provide some data related to, well, what is the state of chronic absence across our state here? And the first thing we want to show you in this chart is the percent of students that are chronically absent by grade and by number. So you see along the bottom axis, kindergarten through 12th grade. And then you see along the vertical axis, the membership count. And then the numbers in red, you see kind of like a little J or almost like a check mark, if you will, where we start off in kindergarten, students being chronically absent, about 18% of the student population that is kindergarten, then dipping down around, third, fourth, fifth grade to the lowest being 12.8%, all the way then to high school, specifically our juniors and seniors, 36 to 38% respectively being chronically absent. So we kind of see it starting off small, kind of getting even smaller, and then exponentially growing as they go throughout their career and education. And then on the next slide, we wanted to also demonstrate to you the breakdown of chronic absenteeism, then by race and ethnicity, to also give you just another perspective. So whereas we see students that identify as American Indian or Alaska Native make up a small population of students in our state, they actually account for 51% of the chronic absences in our state. And then you see students maybe identifying as white, while there may be, in terms of numbers, more of those students, their chronic absenteeism is 15.75%. And then you see the different student groups in between based off of their race and ethnicity. So we want to just offer this as two different ways, and we can continue to break it down in a variety of ways, but wanted to make sure we at least provide some context of it being not just, oh, maybe it's a one particular community, or maybe just exists in one pocket. This is actually something we've been seeing that affects many of our communities across the state. So one way we've been talking about that, as you'll see on the next slide, is how we might address chronic absenteeism. What are things we can do? And taking a tiered approach is actually the things we have seen not only through evidence-based practices, but also best practices across different schools in state and nationally, is taking a tiered approach just how we would to student support services and academic needs. The same idea can be applied here to address chronic absence. We're in tier 1 core, if you will, that is our foundation, and that is what's universal, right? And we see a variety of strategies and actions on the right-hand side, and on the left-hand side, you kind of see a threshold, right? So typically this is like probably the thing that less than 5% of students, or even students that might be at risk, 5 to 9% might be receiving. As we move up the tiers, you see tier 2 is targeted. Here we might be seeing students that are more moderately chronically absent, maybe 10 to 19%. And there's some activities and strategies on the right. And then last, we have our tier 3 specifically that's more intensified. And these are students that maybe have some severe or excessive chronic absenteeism and some strategies that we can employ there. So taking this approach allows us to ensure we have a solid foundation, universal supports, and then that those supports are then tiered based off of the need that a student or family might have. So as you were thinking about this partnership with the Office of Dispute Resolutions and the different restorative practices that they offer and conferences that they offer, on the next slide, you'll see you might be thinking like, well, where would this work potentially fit? And we're just, currently saying this might be a really great tier 2 strategy to consider. So I invite you all, as you listen to the conversations and listen to the rest of the panelists talking, consider how this might be a resource that you can share with your districts and colleagues in your area around how we can get a little bit more targeted when we're talking about the needs of students that may be approaching like 10% or more in chronic absence. And I'll turn it over to Nicole if she'd like anything else to add.
Yeah, Shirley, we actually have a question in the Q&A. It's maybe geared towards you, but also maybe Charles and Michelle can share their thoughts. So I'll go ahead and read that. Do you feel like the chronic absenteeism increases at the 11th and 12th grade levels due to them having a less full schedule where they are only needing to attend school for half days? I know a lot of schools just require them to take the classes they have to have 4 years of, which I think is English and history. So she was just curious if you think there's a correlation there.
That's a great question, and one that I'm gonna copy and save and follow up on, because I think we can do some studying with that. I have heard a variety of reasons. And one of the things you'll also hear from us today is just the importance of root cause analysis. So in some instances, it might be. And then I would say, if that is the case, that school boards and their local boards have a lot of autonomy around establishing policies that are flexible enough to account for different student needs and scheduling requirements. But that's definitely something we can continue to dig into. So thank you for the question, Taryn.
Awesome. Thanks, Shirley.
Yeah, and I would say from our perspective at Mediation West, the majority of the referrals that we receive are actually elementary school, so ages 6 to 10. And of the referrals that we have gotten that have been for those high school age folks, this has not been an issue that we've run across. There are typically other issues at play that underlie that.
Thank you, Charles. On that, Kelly, do you just want to add, I always ask you to share this, about that study in Pennsylvania regarding that early intervention?
Yes, so a few years ago, and I'm guessing it's been about 6 or 7 years, they did a study of using restorative practices on chronic absenteeism, and they did find that the best results happened when it was used at the elementary level, because it's getting the students as well as the families to sort of change their behavior or their attitudes towards school. And then once the students get to that middle school and high school, their behaviors become a little bit more ingrained and can be a little bit more difficult. And so doing it, that really early intervention seems to have the biggest impact. And not that it also has impacts at middle school and high school, and this is something we'll address a little bit later. I think a lot of people, and not necessarily school people, but I think general community think that, when students are absent, it's because they just don't want to attend. And I think what the centers have found out and others who have worked with the students, a lot of times it's something different. There's a reason for the absences that can be addressed. And that's where this process is really helpful because like we talked about, it can really get at that root cause.
Awesome, thank you. All right, we got another poll for you. So we're going to ask you, going to test your knowledge. During the 2022-2023 school year, what % of students were chronically absent? Give it a few more seconds.
All right, we have just about everybody.
Okay. Drum roll, what's the answer? All right, so we had, 5% say, whatever the first one was. And the answer, if 5%, we had 1 say 5%, 7 say 17%, and 19 say 22%, and nobody said 43%. And the answer is 22% that were absent during the 2022-23 school year. So it's very recent data. And I think, Kelly, can we throw in the chat the link to the research? I have it pulled up here too if you want it.
Oh yeah, I lost the link. I'd have to type it in. So if you have it handy, it would be great.
All right, so I threw that link in the chat if you want to pull that up so you can read more about that. Okay, so now that we've kind of gone over some data and looked at the numbers, we're really going to get into these services that our mediation centers can offer to help with this chronic absenteeism. But just so that you can kind of understand the relationship between the Office of Dispute Resolution and the centers, I just kind of wanted to briefly go over the differences between them and how we work together. Kelly and I's office was created by the Dispute Resolution Act. And so we promote mediation and restorative practices in the courts, families, communities. Obviously, that's what we're doing here today as well. And so what the Dispute Resolution Act did was create a system of nonprofit mediation centers. We also have a Dispute Resolution Advisory Council that oversees the activities of the Office of Dispute Resolution. So we really work collaboratively with the centers, to provide them technical assistance and then also that promotion piece of it. And then the mediation centers, they provide a lot of services. And I think a lot of people don't really understand the wide variety of services that they provide. So here's a list of them. Of course, restorative processes is what we're going to talk about today, but they also do child welfare facilitation, parenting plans, community mediation like consumer business, tenant landlord. And so the other one that I kind of bolded there, we're not going to talk about this today, but it's good for you guys to know, and maybe you'll reach out to your center that's covers your area, is education issues related to special education. So if there's concerns in your school with maybe the family and they don't think the IEP is really meeting the needs and everyone's just kind of all over the place, maybe people are butting heads, they can do a mediation on that. So just kind of a good thing for you guys to know. All right, so I mentioned earlier about the $1 million grant that our office has right now. We've got new services with that. And so we have a whole brochure. And so I just want to give everyone a few seconds to either pull up that link or use your phone, go ahead and put it up to the screen and pull up that. So you certainly don't have to. We'll get this sent out and the link will be in the PDF of the PowerPoint. It just goes into more detail so that you have that. And if you want to look at it, and we go on to the next slide and you miss it, throw it in the question and we'll throw it in the chat. All right, let's go. Okay, so I'm gonna talk about here the 4 new services that are offered through our grant. Of course, the excessive absenteeism conferencing, that's what we call it. You guys call it chronic absenteeism. We've been trying to use that language during this webinar. So the first one up there at the top is Juvenile Justice Family Conference. So if a juvenile is in the justice system and maybe they're just, they've got some barriers, that they're at a kind of a deadlock, they're not moving forward with any progress, the mediation centers will bring in the family members and the stakeholders and talk about, you know, what else can we do to support this family? It's very family driven, you know, something that works for the family. And then the Juvenile Justice Family Group Conference is a little bigger. So you're going to have a youth who maybe caused harm to someone, maybe another youth. And so they're in the justice system. And we really want to come up with a plan for this youth to make them successful. Hopefully the victim or the survivor in that situation, maybe they need some services. They want to be at the table to talk about that plan. And both the youth who caused harm and the victim bring in their support. So it's a big conference, lots of supports there to help the youth and the victim and the person who caused harm. And then the Victim Youth Conference is kind of just a smaller version of the family group conference. Usually you're just going to have the youth who caused harm and the survivor or victim. So then that way the victim is able to voice how they were hurt, but then also the person who caused harm can maybe voice why they did something. And again, coming up with a unique plan to resolve that harm and to move forward. And then the Excessive Absenteeism Conference, which we're talking about today, this is kind of a newer conference that we have. And so we're really trying to get the word out. We all know that educators and school staff, they don't have all the time in the world. And so when you've got youth who are missing school, it's hard to go out and figure out exactly what's going on. You know, is something going on at home, something going on in the schools that you're not seeing? And so you can make a referral to your mediation center, and the center directors will talk a little bit more about it, but essentially they're going to kind of convene a conference, the youth, their family, maybe they have a really supportive coach in their life. They're going to come to the table, the school is going to come to the table, and we're going to figure out, you know, what's going on. How can we create a unique plan to make sure this kid gets to school? The centers are huge resource expanders. So if it is something like mental health, they're going to do their best to hook them up with some mental health services, or, you know, give them that contact information. Especially, I know in the Michelle and Charles are great to be here because they definitely have some rural areas and which don't always have the services that maybe Lincoln and Omaha has. So again, they're the ones who are going to prep everyone and get everyone ready. So it takes a lot off the school shoulders, but the center directors will talk more about that here in a bit. All right, just to kind of let you know, because I keep saying, you know, oh, contact your center in your area. So Charles, he's out there in Mediation West with those in the Panhandle, the dark gray. You'll see all the counties that he covers a lot of them. Same with Michelle, she's up there in the huge red section. And then you've got Central Mediation Center. They're located in Kearney. They cover quite a few counties as well. Concord Mediation Center, that's in Omaha, Douglas and Sarpy. And then Lincoln just covers Lancaster. And Kelly kind of mentioned this one earlier, but the Resolution Center down in Beatrice covers those other ones kind of around Lancaster. And so people, they will travel, right? So even though the Central Mediation Center is in Kearney, but they've got something up in Garfield, and you know, they'll travel up there, whether the conference is going to be held at the school, maybe a library, what have you. So just kind of wanted to give that visual for you guys. And it looks like we have a question So how do other centers do the situation when each youth are a combination of victim, youth who caused harm? So both of them, so I'm going to throw this out to Charles and Michelle, of course. So both of them are someone who caused harm, but they're also both the victim. How would you handle that?
So that's a great
You want to
question.
take that one on, Michelle?
Yep, I can start us off. So we've actually had a couple different situations like this, and they're typically those what you would call mutual assaults. Maybe there's a fight at school, something happening, you know, before or after school, whatever that may look like. But in that specific type of situation or scenario, the youth might be both the victim and the one that caused harm. So we're going to have that dialogue, and we're going to ask each of those individuals to put themselves maybe in that other person's shoes. And, you know, we're gathering that information early on so we can try to help them have an understanding of what that other youth felt like, what their peer felt like when the situation was going on, but then also trying to have them, you know, express maybe what caused the start of that, you know, fight or assault to occur. And so it's kind of this delicate balance of facilitating the conversation where we want both kids to have a voice. We want both kids to hear and to try to develop that understanding of what was going on with the other individual that was involved in that situation. And so the ones that we've been able to facilitate have actually, they've gone well. We did run into one situation where we had some family members involved, and the parents struggled a little bit more with the situation, but the kids were able to come together. They came up with a plan, how they were going to work together moving forward in the school. But we had to work a little bit more with the parents in that situation so that they had an understanding, and were in agreement with what we had come up with, or what the families and the young people had come up with related to the event itself that occurred within the school. So I don't know, Charles, how has that worked for you all?
Yeah, so very similarly, when you have like a mutual fight, we've also had referrals for like group fights. So like at the YMCA, those types of things. And we have individual sessions with each of the youth, with family members sometimes, before bringing everybody together before that larger conversation. So we are able to talk about, you know, not only the effects of what you felt on that, but what's it like if you put yourself in that other person's shoes, and what might they have been feeling? And it really does, those individual sessions give us that opportunity to kind of identify those underlying root causes. So if there's been bullying that's been going on, for example, and then the youth finally lashes out with an act of violence, there's that understanding of what was underlying there and what was leading up to that. So it's a much more effective process when you think about changing future behavior than just having some kind of sanction or punishment for getting into a fight. It really does dig down into that root cause and try to prevent that from happening in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, you guys. Well, hopefully that answered the question, because I said thank you, Michelle and Charles. So very good. All right, here's another data set for you. So this graph shows referrals by grade to the mediation centers, essentially this past year. And you'll see that almost half, so 40%, were for middle school. We got kind of the lower percent with elementary at 13%. But again, keep in mind what Kelly said. You know, if you've got younger kids who are missing school, you know, definitely refer them. You know, let's get it addressed before it gets worse, right? And then also keep in mind at that 34% of high school, think back to Shirley's graph earlier and how much 11th and 12th grade kids are missing school, and only 34% are being referred, at least last year. Hopefully we'll see that number go up for that chronic absenteeism conferencing.
Now, one thing that I thought I should just throw out there, since right now these services under the grant are paid for with federal dollars, the grant says that we can work with youth up to 18. So I know a lot of the seniors are already 18. So unfortunately, the funded services are not available the grant funds are not available. But I would still say, and Michelle and Charles, you can pipe in that the centers will still work with you to figure out, is there a way to provide that service and what the funding might look like.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kelly.
Okay, so we've kind of given you this high-level overview of who the centers are, or what things look like, and what I want to try to do is share what the process looks like. Now, what I will say is, as Nicole shared, that map, there are 6 mediation centers here in Nebraska, and each of our mediation centers are nonprofit organizations. So we get oversight from the Office of Dispute Resolution, but we really are our own entity. And so we're really this neutral party that comes to the table to help facilitate the dialogue between family members, maybe family members and school officials, you know, depending on what that situation is and the type of service that is being referred. So with that being said, this is kind of the overall process. My center might have a little bit of a nuance comparative to Charles Center. We cover 24 counties, and you can only imagine the number of school districts that are within those counties. And I know Omaha, even though it's Douglas County, there's multiple school districts that Omaha has to work with as well. And so everybody kind of has some different steps, if you will, that might look a little bit different. But in general, when you look at this chart that was put together, so we can have a school official that can send a referral. That school official could be a school social worker, a guidance counselor. Maybe there's an SRO within the school that is really kind of engaging with kids, and they can provide that referral source. And just this week, our center received a referral from a principal in one of our rural communities. And so it can come from a variety of folks at the school level. Now, we talk about benchmarks here. And so some of the work that we've done, and this might kind of bleed into another slide, but for instance, we've had some cases, or I should say a school that we've worked with, where some young people struggled with the school attendance last year. So we kind of looked at those young people and their families to try to do a conferencing earlier on this school year, once they hit the 5-day mark of missing school. Maybe you've got a young person that really hasn't struggled with attendance in the past, so maybe 10 days would be that benchmark. It's really got individualized based off of what the needs maybe of the school is, but as well as what that youth and family may look like. And so depending on what that looks like, the referral can be done, and we're going to share a link with you at the end of the presentation where you can find that referral if you don't have that already. But once we get that referral, the center is going to send a confirmation, maybe phone call, email, saying, you know, thanks for the referral, we've got it. And like I referenced, I spoke with the school principal on the referral that we got earlier this week to let them know that we received the referral, got a little bit more background information about the young person, what's been going on, and to kind of let them know what the process is and what they could expect. So once we kind of gather some of that background information, we move on to that second box where the center does contact all the individuals that have been identified to participate in the process to have an individual conversation. So Charles kind of mentioned that previously. But what is kind of different and unique in some of the other work that has been done out there is we really try to have those individual conversations. So we might get some additional information from the youth that they haven't shared with other people. Maybe they're embarrassed. Maybe they don't feel comfortable talking to their parent about what's going on in school. Maybe they've been able to tell a trusted adult within the school, but maybe not. It really depends on that young person and kind of what they're going through. So we try to have that individual conversation with the youth that was referred. We talk with the appropriate school officials that may be participating in the conference. And we try to talk with that parent or guardian as well to kind of get their perspective on what they're seeing. Maybe there's something going on at home that they haven't shared with the school. Maybe there's an illness within the family. Maybe there's been a death in the family, something that just hasn't been brought to the school's attention that might truly impact that young person's attendance. So after we have those individual meetings, we work on scheduling when we're able to hold the conference. And so we really try to work off of when the family's available, because we know that sometimes family members, their jobs are not as understanding of being able to participate. But we try to make that work what's best for us, everybody that's involved. So we try to do things in person, but we also know that sometimes, geographical barriers and things of that nature, there might be a hybrid model where some of the participants are able to be in person in a room, and then we've got Zoom. Maybe the school social worker is not able to be in person, so we can bring them in via Zoom, whatever that may look like. And when we have that, we try to invite that dialogue so we can really get to those root causes of what's caused the young person from missing school. Now, the hope is that we're able to maybe uncover that through those individual sessions. And so we really try to work with the parent and the youth to kind of highlight and allow them to be able to share what's going on. And so we have that conference, we share that information. And during that conversation, then ultimately we get to that last box where we want a plan that's developed that is the child's plan, the youth's plan, and the family's plan. It's not my plan as a mediation center. It's not the school's plan as a school, but collaboratively, it's the plan that everybody can agree upon. And the family, the school walk away with that plan the day of that conference with the hope that the young person is able to kind of make some better choices. Or if the family needs supports, that we've brought in those supports that can help that family be successful with their young person getting back into school the way we all want them to be. So again, at a high level, that is the broad overview of how things work. There might be a couple of nuances. And Charles, I don't know if there's anything maybe I've missed that you'd like to share from your center's perspective.
No, I think you did a great overview.
So with that, then we'll kind of move on to that next slide there. And Charles, I'll let you kind of start off. We wanted to share with you all just some examples of some cases that we've had an opportunity to work on that maybe will spark something with some of the families that are in your school districts. So what do you have to share with us today, Charles?
Yeah, so I look back through our cases to refresh my memory, and it's interesting that as we talk about getting to the root causes, sometimes they are things that just seem relatively simple, and sometimes we get into things that are a lot more complex. So I have got a couple examples from the elementary level that were really relatively simple. One was a kiddo, mom's work schedule required him to walk to school, and he was kind of sensitive about the winter weather and didn't like his feet being wet, and he didn't have boots. And so when mom was at work, if it was raining or snowing, he wasn't going to go to school. And so part of what we did for that family was just a resource expander on how can this family get boots for this kiddo so he feels more comfortable walking to school. We had another case where the kid, first grader, ended up not liking coming to school because he had a difficult time seeing the board. And so it was a process of working with the custodial grandma in that case on how to get him some glasses so that he could be more comfortable in school. Some of the cases are a lot more complex, as you might think. We had a 10-year-old that was referred at one point, had missed over 20 days of school at the time of the referral, getting ready to go into the 6th grade. And so there were some concerns about transitioning from the elementary into that junior high building. And really, the student had a lot of health issues. The parents weren't the best about turning in doctor's notes and those types of things. But even with the medical issues, there were real concerns about his gaps in learning. And so that particular plan that we came up with was really quite complex, and it had a lot of steps that the school was going to do and a lot of the steps that the parents were going to do. So on the school side, for example, they were going to provide him with a Chromebook, get links to resources with Nebraska Department of Education and some of the summer programs that were going on. And then on the parent side was really committing to keeping track of that online learning process and utilizing a case manager that had been assigned by their health insurance company to try and work through some things, and scheduling an orientation with the junior high so they as a family could go through and walk through together. And then, you know, just agreeing to the care and the return of the Chromebook as they were working on things. And just focusing on that student's needs and him being able to transition well. We had another case at the middle school level that was a 14-year-old that got referred, and his chronic absenteeism was really caused through some mental health issues. There were some ADD, ADHD, and anxiety, some impulsiveness. He was suffering from some depression and had some self-hatred issues. And as we were working with the family and the school, found out that there was an older sibling that was on probation that was also having some attendance issues. And this case actually transitioned into one of those family conferences where we worked with the family and probation and the school and looking at community resources all around for that family, and developed a really robust plan. One of the most meaningful cases that we have, and the last example I'll share with you here, was a kindergartner where the school had referred this kindergartner, and the mom did not reply to the original invitation to mediate. But the school sent over a second referral later on, and at that point, we did get mom to engage in the process. And we found out very quickly that there were some domestic violence issues with the family when we were having those initial conversations. And so we were able to set up a process with mom and dad separately, working with the school, and really found that there was poor parent-to-parent communication because of these abuse issues. And the student was experiencing a lot of added stress transitioning from home to home, and the school had really been taking an approach of trying to talk to the parents together a lot. And so this plan looked a lot like the school agreed to make mom the primary point of contact, and really shifted their communication with dad to be more like, hey dad, how can you support this student with our goals when it's your parenting time? And probably the most significant thing that helped with this is the parents shared their parenting plan schedule that was on file with the court. So the school was aware on a particular day who should be responsible for the drop off and the pickup. And they would reach out to that parent, and that would help not cause stress between the parents because you're not having the wrong one contacted. But then each parent also put on file a backup person that could be called during their parenting time, so that if they weren't able to, if they didn't show up and nobody could get a hold of them, that they were reaching out to this backup person rather than the other parent, kind of creating that conflict again. And so I like that example. It shows us a lot of things, right? You can have a great impact at the kindergarten level. You can have a great impact even if it's been referred before and it never went anywhere the first time. But there's also really creative ways to put these family plans together that helps the school, helps the family, and doesn't cause a lot of burden for folks. Michelle, I'm sure you've got some interesting examples from your center as well.
Yeah, I mean, some they're kind of similar to what you shared, but I want to just highlight, Charles, kind of what you talked about with that last case specifically. Really, one of the foundational things of this grant that Nebraska was awarded is we really want to be preventative. We want to go, upstream. So being able to offer this excessive absenteeism type conferencing with elementary age kids is really a huge thing, I think, for Nebraska. So some of my background and some of the work I've done historically, there hasn't always been access to some of these services at no cost for families. And so I think that's a huge thing for Nebraska families, and especially rural families where, as we stated earlier, we don't always have everything in our backyard, like some of our urban counterparts do in our state. And so for rural Nebraska to be able to have all 93 counties covered to offer these interventions is really important. That's one thing I want to highlight. And the second thing is the transition that you talked about, Charles, because the case I wanted to talk about from our center was one that started off as a truancy referral. We had one of our schools referred a sibling strip of 2 teenage girls. They were missing school, and I think that the school had some ideas of what was going on. But as we kind of dug in and we were having some conversations, and we were able to get a hold of the father in this case, the children's mother had passed away, several months ago, and the father was struggling, working a lot, and there was actually 2 younger kids in the home that they were trying to help provide care for. And the father didn't know how to access childcare resources because the mother in the family was a stay-at-home mom and was taking care of the kids, getting them to school and doing all those things. And with her unexpected passing, that really kind of left the dad struggling not only with the grief of losing his wife, but having some challenges with having 4 kids now that he was trying to help raise. And so what we did is we transitioned from that truancy or excessive absenteeism conferencing more to that family conferencing approach, where we were able to bring in folks in the community to help the dad understand how he could apply for childcare support or assistance and Medicaid and some of those things that we can give people phone numbers and we can do things like that, but having that warm body there that can actually maybe walk somebody through and help out was really a beneficial aspect to that conference. And so I just wanted to kind of highlight, not only are we able to work with the younger population, that's something I hope people can take away from the discussion we're having, but how we're able to transition. So you might have a young person or a family that you're not sure what's going on, and this sounds like maybe something that would be good. I mean, again, we're that neutral party that can come in and help facilitate that dialogue, where you can call up my office. I know you can call Charles's office, any of our centers, and you can talk with us about this is what we've got going on, and we can help identify what would be maybe a good fit for that family or that youth in what that current situation is that's going on. And so I'm sure we could go on about a variety of examples with the other services we have with like victim youth conferencing and things of that nature, but considering we're wanting to focus on that excessive absenteeism, I'll kind of leave it at that. And Nicole and Kelly, I'll let you guys kind of move us along.
Thank you guys so much. Those were great examples. All right, we're going to go ahead and jump into another poll. So it should be popping up here in a second. In your opinion, what are 3 of the top reasons youth miss school? We've got quite a few for you to choose from, so choose 3 of them. We've got unaddressed mental health, poverty, purposefully skipping school, bullying, not challenged enough. Youth doesn't feel challenged in school, physical health issues, and family dynamics. Give it a few more seconds. Let's maybe get 2 more. Maybe.
Okay.
Okay, let's go ahead and share. All right, so the top one that people thought was maybe one of the top reasons is poverty issues. So maybe it's housing. Charles talked about the boots, clothing, transportation. And then the next one is unaddressed mental health. I think we talked a lot about that today, whether the mental health is even known or they can't find the resources, they can't afford maybe the medication or to attend therapy. And then the third one is bullying. I think we all know that That has been a huge concern lately, especially with social media. And maybe those kids don't feel comfortable. They're embarrassed, and maybe they don't want to go talk to their school officials for whatever reason. So yeah, I think we're all aware that there's definitely underlying issues when it comes to kids missing school.
All right, so one of the things we also wanted to talk about today is data. Now, with the excess of absenteeism, we shared a little bit about case referrals, but because this work is fairly new, we don't have enough case data to have good evaluation yet. That is something that's coming with the grant. So towards the end of the grant, we should have some more information to share. But what we do have is our previous work. So our current grant was built off of a previous grant. And with that service, we really focused on that victim youth conferencing that we talked about. And so we wanted to share some of those outcomes that we had with the victim youth conferencing. And I don't know if we have the time frame on here. I believe the time frame is from 2018 to 2021. And so during that time, there were 871 case referrals. Of those cases, there was a reparation plan in 88%. So we didn't quite meet our 95% of being fulfilled, but we did reach 88%. The satisfaction rate, we were hoping for 97, but we did get 91. Still, that's a high satisfaction rate. And then the biggest piece is that recidivism piece, that we had 87% of the youth who did not recidivate in 1 year. And so we wanted to share that with you. But another piece that isn't on the screen is where these referrals came from. And so we had 30.2% came from Tier 1. So Tier 1 is what we identify as pre-court, pre-diversion. And that's what this current grant is really focused on. And Michelle mentioned that. It's really upstream. So we are trying to get these services out there before a youth has to be court involved. And sometimes based on the situation, the severity, they will need to be court involved. But there are some times, like for some of these chronic absenteeism, when it's dealing with those poverty issues or those unaddressed mental health, maybe those are things that we can address upstream before they get to that 20. So that would be an ultimate goal of what we are working toward. All right. Oh, is this one yours, Nicole?
You go ahead.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about these services, but we haven't yet talked about how do you get them. And so we do have, again, we have a QR code that you can use or a link. And this is really, as Michelle noted, every center is their own nonprofit, their own organization. So they all have their own referral form. So what we did is we were able to combine all of those. So with this statewide online referral form, you can go in and say what type of service you're needing or that you don't know. And then you find your center and it will actually provide you with that center's referral form. And so once the center receives that, they can reach out to you and get that additional information that's needed and start moving that process forward. So that's really an easy way for schools. So it can be schools, it can be teachers, it can be family members, it can be community members. So the referrals are really open to anyone. All right. Nicole?
Yeah, and I did throw in there that if you didn't get that QR code there on your phone, I did go ahead and throw that referral in there. And so we've got about 6 minutes left. For any questions, you can throw it in the chat. It can be an anonymous chat. You can raise your hand and we'll unmute you. Whether you've experienced these conferences before or you never have, we'd love to hear from any of you.
While we're waiting for questions, I will go ahead and let this group know that one of the things that really helped our work move along is we had 2 school districts that adopted language in their handbooks about restorative practices and the fact that restorative practices may be administered by school personnel or by folks that are associated with the state approved mediation center. That has really helped us in school districts where that language isn't in there. A lot of times we're needing to get releases, and it takes longer to get folks to the table. But whereas those school districts where parents have signed off that they've received that handbook and that our part is a part of what they can expect, that helps that go along. So that's something to consider potentially on a policy level that might help move the work along more quickly. Because while you've got a kiddo missing a lot of school, even waiting a few days to get parents to sign off on a meeting is critical days out of the classroom.
Thank you, Charles. And we do have a question in the chat. Are there interpreters available for the conferences? So I'll throw that out to Charles, Michelle, or Kelly.
So I can kind of take that. So for my center, and I think, Charles, the same, we do have access. We have 3 trained mediators that are bilingual, which helps. So if we're able to make schedules work and things of that nature, but we do work with the resources that we have available, whether that's through county availability, language line, things of that nature, so that we're able to meet the language needs of the families that we're serving. So
thanks, Michelle. Yeah, so we're absolutely gonna meet the families where they're at, make sure they get this service. Got about 4 more minutes left. We'll just kind of keep it open in case people think of things. Keep in mind that you're going to get that survey. You should hopefully by tomorrow see an email from probably Kelly with the link to this recording. Please share with your colleagues, with your peers. I think we had about 50 people sign up, and about 30 showed up today for the majority of it. So obviously some people weren't able to make it for whatever reason, but we definitely want to share this information with them. We have another session in December. It is geared towards school staff, right? So, principals, teachers, SROs, whatever. But if you knew that someone missed today and they're with the ESUs, they can certainly attend in December. We're not going to turn anyone away. We just want to get the word out.
So I have a question for Michelle and Charles. So how do you provide these services? Are they always in person? Do you ever do it virtually? And how do you decide?
Typically, these have been in person for us. And sometimes we'll have parents and school folks that'll want to travel to the center and use our conference room there. Sometimes if families have school trauma, walking into the building can be difficult. But we have done several of these in the school building as well, where we've traveled to the school district and used a room there. We do have the ability to do that virtual piece or a hybrid if there's somebody we feel should be a part of the conversation that just can't make it in person. But whatever works best for the families, as Michelle said earlier, and whatever can help us get that scheduled in a timely manner for the student to make progress.
Thanks, Charles.
yeah, and my situation would be the same, Kelly. So we try to do most of these in person, just working with kids and having them be there to be present. But we do have the flexibility to offer a hybrid option. Again, depending on schedules and, Nebraska with our weather that we have, coming up, we might not be able to safely travel. So we might be able to continue the conversation virtually. So.
All right. Well, thank you. Well, we are at 3:59. So I want to thank all of the panelists for being a part of it, especially very grateful to Shirley for collaborating with us. So I think we are good for the hour. Thank you so much. Again, as soon as we close out, you should receive that survey. It'll pop up in your browser. So if you would take a few minutes to answer that or respond to that, that would be greatly appreciated. and hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.